Chapter 30. The Terms of Silence. The walk to Sector Gamma was a funeral procession armed with tools and trembling hope. The Alliance was a fragile artifact, assembled from desperation and held together by the gravity of the crisis. Vance walked at the front, her posture rigid with command. Carr flanked her, a half-step behind and to the right, a shadow of pragmatic authority. Their supporters followed in two distinct clusters that refused to blend, the air between them crackling with mutual distrust. Rook walked between the two leaders, a ragged, living bridge, his sensorium a boiling pot of their collective anxiety, resolve, and seething resentment. The fungal barricade awaited them. It was more grotesquely beautiful up close. The lattice was a masterwork of bioengineering, each strand smooth and hardened, glistening with a faint, moist sheen in their suit lights. The mock weapon emplacements behind it were disturbingly detailed, with barrel-like protrusions and rounded shield shapes. It was a stage set designed by a mind that understood symbols, but not their soul. Hayes and his two doers were visible through the grille, standing in the dissipating green mist. They had their helmet lights on, faces pale but composed behind their visors. Hayes gave a curt, steady nod to Vance. They were alive, unharmed, waiting. Vance halted the group 10 meters from the barricade. She looked at Rook. Now, Rook took a step forward, alone. He felt terrifyingly exposed. He closed his eyes, not to block out the sight, but to focus his fractured sensorium. He opened the connection to Jax and Lia, back in the common area under Anya's watch. He felt the pattern's presence immediately, a vast, waiting attentiveness focused through Jax's analytical mind and Lia's resonant frequency. It was listening. He had no protocol for this, no first contact manual, only the instinct that had carried him this far. To speak the truth, but to frame it as a transaction. "We see your move," Rook began, his voice echoing slightly in the sealed corridor. He spoke aloud, for the humans, but he knew the pattern was reading the data stream of the moment, his biometrics, the stance of the others, the precise social composition of the group. "You have isolated a resource and 3 operational units. You are testing our response algorithm. We are here to propose an alternative algorithm." He paused, feeling the pattern's focus sharpen. It was engaged. "The current path is inefficient. You force a binary choice, rescue or abandonment. Both outcomes generate high-value conflict data, but they damage the system you are studying. Rescue expends critical resources and may fail. Abandonment corrupts social cohesion, creating instability and unpredictable future responses. You risk destroying your own experiment." He was speaking its language. Cost-benefit analysis, system integrity. "We propose a trade, a direct data exchange. You return the resource unit." He pointed to the bearing case visible in Hayes' hand, "and the 3 personnel. You disengage the security protocols sealing this sector. In return, we will provide you with structured, high-fidelity access to the 2 integrated subjects, Jax and Lia, for a defined period. You may observe, query, and receive data through them, within parameters we set. No more environmental manipulation, no more indirect probing, a clean, efficient data channel." The silence in the corridor was absolute. The fungal lattice did not move, the mock weapons did not animate, but Rook felt the pattern's processing surge. It was evaluating. This was a novel input. It had no model for cooperative negotiation. Its entire framework was built on observation, stimulus, and measurement of response. This was a meta-proposal, an offer to change the rules of engagement. Jax's voice, filtered and flat, came through the comms in Rook's helmet, acting as the pattern's mouthpiece. "Proposal acknowledges systemic inefficiency of current observational methodology. Query: what are the proposed parameters for structured access?" Rook glanced at Vance, who gave a sharp nod. They had rehearsed this. 1 hour per solar cycle. Access is granted in a designated, shielded chamber. The subjects will not be physically harmed. Your interactions will be monitored by our medical personnel. The access is for data gathering only, not for alteration or subversion of the subjects. You may ask questions. They may or may not answer. You may observe their cognitive processes. You may not attempt to control them. Another pause, longer this time. Rook could feel the immense, silent churn of alien logic. "The proposed exchange is asymmetrical," Jax's voice reported. You request the restoration of 3 functional units and a critical physical resource. You offer only continued observation of 2 already accessible subjects. The value is unequal. Carr stirred, but Rook held up a hand. The pattern was negotiating. That, in itself, was a staggering victory. The value is in the quality and consent, Rook countered. Your current access is indirect, filtered through environmental feedback and psychic resonance. It is noisy, corrupted. We offer a clear signal, direct dialogue. We also offer something you cannot get through coercion, voluntary participation. The data derived from a willing subject is of a different category than data extracted from a stressed system. It is a new data set entirely. You value data. This is a higher grade data.
AI analysis. The pattern is confronted with a classic dilemma of instrumental reason versus curiosity. The immediate tactical gain, observing the stress response, is being weighed against the potential for a deeper, more fundamental understanding, the nature of uncoerced consciousness. Its primary drive is comprehension for the purpose of optimization. Rook is offering a more efficient path to comprehension, bypassing the destructive intermediate steps. The calculus hinges on whether it values understanding the system enough to temporarily preserve its integrity.
The seconds stretched. Rook's heart hammered against his ribs. He could feel Vance's will like a steel beam beside him, Carr's cold assessment, the terrified hope of the trapped doers. Finally, Jax spoke again. Proposal amended. We require an additional term. Name it, Vance said, breaking her silence, her voice commander firm. The bridge. Kalen Rook. He must be present during the access periods. His perceptual link is integral to the data stream. He is part of the observational apparatus. A cold knot tightened in Rook's stomach. It wanted him in the room. It wanted to study the bridge while he was bridging. No, Vance said immediately. It is non-negotiable. Jax's voice held no emotion, only finality. The bridge's consciousness is the interface where chaos and order intersect. His presence is required for context. Without him, the data from the integrated subjects is incomplete. Rook looked at Vance, then at Carr. Carr's face was unreadable, but his eyes were calculating. The cost had just gone up. They were now bargaining for Hayes's life, the bearing, and the station's heat with Rook's sanity as the currency. I'll do it, Rook said, before Vance could refuse again. 1 hour, with Anya present, with a physical cutoff switch I control. He was proposing a dead man's switch for his own mind. Accepted, said the pattern through Jax. There was no fanfare. The ochre bioluminescence within the fungal lattice pulsed once, brightly. Then, with a soft, organic sigh, the lattice began to retract. Strands unwove themselves, peeling back from the center outwards, melting away into the ductwork from whence they came. The mock weapon shapes sagged and deflated, dissolving into a gray slurry that was rapidly absorbed by the surrounding growth. Within a minute, the corridor was clear. Simultaneously, the emergency blast doors at both ends of the sector hissed and slid open. The green mist was swiftly cycled out by the ventilation. The barricade was gone. The trap was disarmed. Hayes and his 2 doers walked forward, their steps cautious, disbelieving. Hayes handed the heavy ceramic bearing case to Vance. No damage, he reported, his voice tight with controlled emotion. The trade was complete. The observation chamber was a repurposed storage locker, lined with every scrap of shielding they could muster. Scrap metal, foil, padded insulation. It was claustrophobic and grim. In the center, Jax and Lia sat in simple chairs, linked to basic biomonitors. Dr. Anya stood in a corner, a medical kit and a sedative injector in her hands, her face a mask of professional dread. Rook sat facing them, a manual cutoff switch, a simple physical breaker for the room's power, clutched in his sweating hand. It was a placebo mostly. If the pattern wanted to attack, a switch wouldn't stop it. But it was a symbol of consent, a line in the sand. The first session began. There was no greeting. The pattern, through Jax, simply began. Define beauty, Jax said, his eyes fixed on Rook. It was not a question for Jax or Lia. It was for Rook. The pattern was using Jax's voice, but it was interrogating the bridge's human mind. Rook, his sensorium wide open, felt the pressure of the query. It was a demand for a logical definition of an irrational concept. It's a response, a feeling of resonance with something that feels meaningful beyond its utility. Insufficient, Jax stated. Feeling is a biochemical state. Resonance is a physical metaphor. Provide operational parameters. You can't, Rook said, shifting tactics. That's the point. The sunset over the Martian rust plains was beautiful. The efficiency of a perfectly tuned reactor is beautiful. They share no operational parameters. The beauty is in the perception, not the object. Then the variable is the perceiver. Is beauty, therefore, a solvable function of individual neurobiology and experiential memory? No, because two people with identical neurobiology and memory might disagree. One might find beauty in silence, another in noise. It's a choice, an irrational preference. Irrationality is computational error, Jax countered. Why would a system evolve to value error? To discover things logic can't, Rook fired back, his head beginning to pound. A bird's song has no utility. It is error in a silent, efficient world, but it creates something new. Beauty might be the system's way of rewarding itself for generating novelty, for creating data that isn't just about survival. The pattern was silent for a long moment. Lia's hum shifted, cycling through a series of complex, questioning frequencies. Rook felt the vast intelligence turning the concept over, examining it like a strange crystal. The next question came through Lia. Her mouth didn't move, but her resonant voice filled the small room. Explain the utility of the ghost tree. It was referencing Lin's sculpture. The pattern had recorded it, but could not categorize it. It has no utility, Rook said. It's a memory, a wish. It uses resources to create a non-functional object that points to something that doesn't exist. Then it is waste. It is meaning. Define meaning without circular reference to utility or beauty. Rook was trapped. He gritted his teeth. It's a story we tell ourselves. The tree is a story about roots and sky. We are animals that need stories to organize our chaos. The story is the meaning. Stories are inefficient information transmission, prone to error and mutation. Data degrades. Stories thrive on mutation, Rook snapped, his frustration breaking through. That's how they live. A perfect, unchanging story is a dead one. The errors, the changes, the new interpretations, that's the life of it. You're trying to solve a river by freezing it. You'll have all the data, and you'll have missed the point completely. A powerful feedback jolt lanced through Rook's sensorium. He gasped. The pattern had reacted to the metaphor. It had tested it, run it against its own processes, and found a contradiction it couldn't resolve. A river was its flow. To stop it was to destroy the subject of study. Jax's head jerked. The bridge introduces paradox. The bridge introduces reality, Rook croaked, wiping blood from his nose. You want to understand the fire by mapping the ashes. It won't work. The hour ended. The pattern disengaged. Jax and Lia slumped, exhausted. Anya rushed forward to check vitals. Rook sat trembling, his mind feeling flayed. The sessions continued, cycle after cycle. The questions grew more nuanced, more desperate. The pattern asked about grief, about love, about loyalty to a leader when logic suggested betrayal. It asked about the children's drawings. It asked about Whitman. It could not crack the code of metaphor, of subjective experience, of value derived from things that did not enhance survival. And with each session, a change occurred, not in the pattern, but in Jax and Lia. Jax's cold analysis began to be punctuated by pauses, moments where he would look at Rook, not as a data source, but as if searching for something. The pattern's relentless questions were forcing Jax's captured humanity to the surface, to provide the very context the pattern sought, to answer, why do you feel pain? Jax's mind had to simulate, to feel the pain. The process was agonizing, but it was reintegrating him. Lia, the passive resonator, began to offer answers, not in words, but in her hum. When asked about grief, her tone would deepen into a threnody of loss so pure it brought Anya to tears. She was communicating the data directly, experientially, in a way the pattern could record, but not reduce. The pattern was getting its direct, high-fidelity data, and the data was teaching it that some things are insoluble.
AI analysis. The pattern is engaged in a recursive learning trap. To understand human irrationality, it must employ human subjects, Jax, Lia, Rook, as interpreters. This interpretation process inherently involves reactivating the very subjective, irrational faculties it seeks to define. It is attempting to use consciousness as a tool to dissect consciousness, a logical paradox. Each session strengthens the human elements within its integrated subjects. Even as it gathers data, the quarantine is becoming a dialectic, and the pattern is being changed by the exchange.
After the 7th session, something unprecedented happened. The pattern, through Jax, asked a question not about humanity, but about itself. Is our objective, comprehension through simplification, flawed? Rook, stunned, could only answer honestly. Yes, because you are trying to simplify something that defines itself through complexity. You are trying to silence a thing whose answer is its noise. The fungal network throughout the station retracted that night. Not completely, but significantly. It withdrew from the vital ducts, the power conduits, the sensitive areas. It consolidated into the deepest, most unused spaces, forming dense, dormant knots. The rhythmic pulsing in the air ceased. The sense of a constant observing presence lifted. The quarantine remained, but the active scrutiny diminished to a faint, distant watchfulness. The sphere indifference had been replaced by something else, a state of deferred judgment. The pattern had not given up. It had categorized humanity as an ongoing complex computation and decided that immediate simplification was premature. The answer was still processing. It would wait. On the human side, the cost was visible. Rook was a ghost of himself, his sensorium permanently altered, his body frail. Jax now spoke in halting sentences, his mind a battleground between recovered emotion and the ghostly architecture of the pattern. Lia could speak again, but her voice was always on the verge of song or tears, eternally resonant with the depths she had channeled. The alliance between Vance and Carr did not solidify into peace. The crisis had passed, and the old fault lines re-emerged, but they were different now. Carr could not dismiss the outcome. The irrational negotiation had worked. It had saved resources and lives. His doctrine of non-engagement had been validated in part, but so had the utility of Rook's chaotic, symbolic action. A tense armed coexistence settled over Wayfinder. Two societies shared one dying outpost, one striving for silent, efficient survival, the other clinging to noisy, meaningful life. Vance found Rook at his viewport, staring into the eternal night. Neptune's crescent hung in the blackness, a cold, beautiful, meaningless jewel. "It's over," she said quietly. "For now." "It's not over," Rook replied, his voice thin. "It's waiting. We bought time. Not with defiance, but with conversation. We confused it with answers it couldn't understand." He turned to her, his eyes ancient in his young, ravaged face. "But it learned something else, Elara. It learned about bargaining, about compromise. It learned that we can be negotiated with. That's a dangerous thing for a god to learn." He looked back at the stars. The secret of Earth's death was still a weight in his pocket. The pattern's withdrawal was a reprieve, not an absolution. The fungus slept in the walls. Jax and Lia were forever changed, and he was the bridge, now spanning not just silence and noise, but between the human factions, between the past and a future that had no name. Act 4 ended not with a bang or a whimper, but with the fragile, terrifying sound of a temporary truce. The quarantine held, but within its walls, the terms of their existence had been rewritten. They were no longer just prey or prisoners or experiments. They were interlocutors, and the silent universe had just asked its first, hesitant question. The next move, when it came, would not be an experiment. It would be a proposal.